Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our last Youth Career Mentorship session. We hope that those who were able to attend are leaving with a clearer understanding of how your talents and passions can be directed to the service of your fellow human beings and how your work, done in the spirit of service, can build unity across cultures and peoples. We also hope that you will continue to carry on these conversations with your peers, your children, and your students. As you know, all the presenters in this series have achieved excellence in their field of work and have applied their knowledge and expertise to address different types of social injustices and to advance inclusion and equity at the local and global levels. Tonight, we are honored to have with us Dr. Traci Johnson and Dr. Chris Sexton. Dr. Johnson is an obstetrician and a gynecologist at Truman Medical Center and an assistant professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the UMKC School of Medicine. She is a member of the Board of Directors of New House Shelter, an ecumenical community group in Greater Kansas City that meets the needs of victims of domestic violence. Dr. Johnson received her medical degree from Drexel University College of Medicine in Philadelphia and completed a residency on obstetrics and gynecology at the Barnes Jewish Hospital, Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. Dr. Sexton is Director of Research at Kansas City Center for Anxiety Treatment. She received her PhD in Developmental Psychology with honors and a master's degree in Clinical Social Work from Columbia University, where she studied risk and protective factors for adolescents in the context of achievement pressure. Dr. Sexton's clinical and research interests have focused on evidence-based treatments, including dialectical behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety, OCD, and associated mental health conditions in early childhood through adulthood. As our speakers go through their presentation, I encourage you to type your questions in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. We'll go through some of these questions in the second half of our session. With that, I'll give the floor to our speakers. Dear Traci and Chris, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Please, when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Martha. Traci, it's good to see you. It's good to see you, Martha. Originally, the title of my presentation was The Pitfalls of Perfectionism and How to Avoid Those. And that is a topic dear to my heart that I think is very relevant and one that I think would be beneficial for us to talk about. But at this time, my heart is really broken. And it's broken by watching what is happening in our country right now. A country that was already heavy with the weight of the COVID-19 crisis and broken by the weight of institutional racism that has resulted in the murder of countless Black lives. Some of the names, Sean Monterosa, Justin Howell, Eric Garner, John Crawford, Tanisha Anderson, and George Floyd most recently. So those are just some of the names I know. And there are many names that you can read, but there are many more that you cannot read anywhere because we don't know all those names and we don't have access to that now as a country. So I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone a little bit tonight to talk to you about a topic that has informed my research work and my clinical work, and that has really become the foundation of what I want to do with the rest of my life. And that topic is cultural humility. And I know that I'm qualified to talk to you today because as one of your last speakers, one of the speakers, Payam Akavan, and I don't think I said the name right, Martha, but I'm trying. Thank you. he said something in his presentation that really stuck with me. He said, if you care and have compassion and empathy, you will always find a way to do good in the world. And so I am here today to tell you about what helps me do good in the world. And that's this lifelong process of cultural humility. And it is a process that is something we practice, and the foundation of it and what it looks like in action is love. And the mechanism by which that works is relationships. So I knew that I couldn't talk effectively about this topic today alone, because no one does this work alone. And so I was fortunate enough to bring in a dear friend who's also a colleague, who also as a clinician has work that is founded on cultural humility. And we are here today, Dr. Traci Johnson and I, as clinicians and very much in that hat, and want to share with you some of the ways in which we have used cultural humility in our research and in our clinical work, and give you ideas about that. But we are also here as friends, as mothers who were just on a Zoom soccer call not 10 minutes before this, and as human beings, most importantly. So we want to share today with you, I think, via conversation. I hope it can be a dialogue, and if I could have it, I would have a way for us all to talk together, and that's, I think, not possible in this format. So today we'll be modeling what that conversation looks like, and how to have conversations that are informed by cultural humility, and what that looks like. So thank you all for allowing for that flexibility in the topic change. Traci, anything that you would like to add yet?
I think you started it perfectly.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is share my screen so that, okay, whoops. You can see a slide deck so that can you see that okay, Martha?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Traci. Okay, and I'm having a problem advancing it then. Okay, there we go. So I think the first thing that I wanted to do, is to share a video with you. And to that end, I'm going to have to share a different part of my screen. Can you see that video, or do I need to go back?
Go back.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm going to share this video. I did not create the concept of cultural humility, and I want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what the foundations look like. This is a lovely film by Vivian Chavez that features Melanie Turvalon and Jan Maria Garcia, two clinicians who founded this, and it's going to speak for itself, and then we'll talk more after that.
We can't hear the sound. We don't hear.
The word that I think of it is S.
Can you hear now?
Yes, yes.
You. Opening.
Receive. Compassion.
Love. The principles of cultural humility offer one more framework. Contribute to what has got to be our ultimate goal. Yes, our ultimate goal is that there will be a sense of equity, a sense of equality, and a kind of respect that we are driving forward.
cultural humility that is a multi-dimensional concept, and certainly Melanie Turgalon and I conceptualized 3 dimensions.
The first is lifelong learning and critical self-reflection. And in that critical self-reflection, it is the understanding of how each of us, every single one of us, is a complicated, multidimensional human being. Each of us comes with our own histories and stories, our heritage, our point of view. You're looking at me now. I am very fair-skinned. When I was a little girl, my hair was blonde. My eyes are blue. People often tried to call me anything but African American. I have a history. My identity is rooted in that history. My parents gave me the knowledge of my own social identity, and my own experience in life has created that. I get to say who I am.
The second tenet, after self-reflection and ongoing lifelong learning and development, is this notion that we must mitigate the power imbalances, to recognize and mitigate the power imbalances that are inherent often in our clinician patient or clinician client or service provider community dynamics.
And then finally, the piece that I would offer that Jan and I feel people often either don't read or don't like, which is, and the institution has to model these principles as well.
An African-American nurse is caring for a middle-aged Latino woman several hours after the patient had undergone surgery. A Latino physician on a consult service approached the bedside and, noting the moaning patient, commented to the nurse that the patient appeared to be in a great deal of post-operative pain. The nurse summarily dismissed his perception, informing him that she took a course in nursing school in cross-cultural medicine and knew that Hispanic patients overexpress the pain that they're feeling. The Latino physician had a difficult time influencing the perspective of this nurse, who focused on her self-proclaimed cultural expertise.
It was curious to this Latino physician who, first of all, was Latino, not like all, in his case, not like all Mexican Americans know everything there is to know about Mexican American patients. That wasn't it, but he might have been a resource for that African American nurse in that moment that she didn't feel like she needed, again, because she had bought into this notion of competence, of cultural competence.
The distinction between cultural humility and cultural competence was that we were in a process and a relationship that had many other layers to it, and that we were less comfortable with this, with even the term of competence, in a way that I think people understand well, and that it implies, especially for people who are providers and are trained in academia, that you are then all-knowing and all-powerful. And we felt like that was not what was happening for us as we were learning from community and understanding in a very practical way how families were coming to the hospital and feeling as if they really were not being heard from their own heritage and history, and how that impacted what they came to the hospital with that we didn't know anything about, hadn't even a clue about. For us, this is part of the humility piece of it, getting to understand that I'm not trying to humiliate you, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, I'm trying to help us all understand that that life is like this, and to, in a certain sense, be really happy about not knowing.
In April of 1992, in the wake of the Los Angeles riots, following the initial not guilty verdict of the police officers accused of beating Mr. King, the Children's Hospital Oakland community was compelled to meet in a series of highly charged sessions to expose and critique our own patterns of institutional racism, injustice, and inequity. My name is Dr. Melanie Turbalon, and I am Director of Multicultural Affairs here at Children's Hospital Oakland.
I want to thank everybody for coming to what is a celebration for me of this year.
Jan and I had the good fortune, really, to be together in the same place when this work was evolving. Jan and I, while we're several years difference in age, are both African-American women, and both raised by women who were teachers. And we come out of that, and fathers who were working men, who come out of that Southern tradition and who participated fully in the civil rights movement in the way that meant that they made sacrifices and their children made sacrifices, and they taught us about those sacrifices and raised us each in ways to understand that we were here to serve.
Okay. So I wanted to present that so you have an overview. And as you can see from that video, cultural humility is a stark contrast to cultural competence, which is still, I think, probably the most common framework that's used in medical settings. I would be interested, Traci, in your view on this, but I think within psychology, there's been a shift recently. It's still, there's an emphasis kind of on this didactic learning approach. And what I discovered in cultural humility that I think really distinguishes it is that there is this lifelong learning, that there is this constant self-reflection and critical self-reflection that's going on, and that there's actually a built-in mechanism in this framework for addressing power imbalances and addressing racism at the institutional level.
I think what is built into cultural competence and the notion of cultural competence primarily is that you can check a checkbox and become competent in one singular culture just by doing the work. And that also a group of people that belonging to one demographic all are the same. Every single person is the same, and so it's one size fits all even within that culture group or demographic group. And so just by definition, it's a wash. It's not something you can ever become culturally competent in, because even in all Jewish people, they're all very different. They come, just like she said, they come from different backgrounds, they have different stories, different histories, and different things influencing them. And we're not even talking about that. That's just talking about racial and ethnic groups. We're not even talking about people who have been adopted and people who have all sorts of different layered demographics that they fit into. So it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And have you seen, though, that is something that is propagated in the medical community, that this idea is still pretty salient?
It is I would say as recent as 10 years ago, probably every 2 years you had to do a cultural competence course that said that you learned that, I think I'm even quoting one of the sessions, which said that Asian American women are less likely to verbalize their distrust or their, not to, do whatever treatment therapy that you're talking. You say the patient needs surgery, they may not want it, but they're less likely to tell you that and go along with it because of different cultural practices that they follow. So you'll have to really work hard to get them to you that they trust you. African American women are more likely to show that they're a little bit more aggressive about different things because of what's going on in their neighborhood or anything like that. And just it's one size fits all for whatever you see rather than what the person says that they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that too. So one of the tools that we wanted to put forth for you to see is the cultural identity inventory. which is a tool that's often used to just try to really get at different vantage points that that help us understand first aspects of ourselves, and then think about what is communicated to others. So I just thought, that this might be something that would be a tool for everyone to do. And typically, when we're doing trainings in cultural humility, we would take the time for everyone to take a minute to kind of write this down. Traci and I thought for today that we would just each do this, and every time I fill out this tool, something different stands out. So I thought we could take a couple of minutes to reflect on that, and then Traci, what do you think? Just share maybe a couple,
Sure,
a couple things that stand out, a couple of the rows that stand out, and kind of walk through each of those. So I'm just going to take a minute to do that myself, and Traci, you can start us.
Did you share your screen?
Yeah. Oh, can you not see it?
Share your screen really quickly.
Oh, thank you. I thought I was. Okay. Can you guys see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so there's the tool. And what stands out today to you, Traci?
So I would say today, well, you go first. I'm struggling with a couple things, what I want to start with. You go first.
Today, I think what's coming up for me are the top three. So gender, race, and class. I think gender for me is something that I notice about myself that's influenced different aspects of my life. It's part of how I identify as a mother, as a wife. It's something that everyone can see in me when I walk in the room, and it's kind of encoded in every way that I carry myself. And it's something, if I think about the cultural dimension, that's kind of the piece of it. The values or the messages, I think there is, there's a sense that is associated with strength. And in my family, there's the value of women being strong, and that's a part of my socialization. In terms of domination or subordination, which is the idea with this tool is to really look at, is this a dominant or subordinate trait? And it's not that one is good or bad, it's sort of thinking about what it looks like in society, and it can change too, depending on what's going on. I mean, I think for me, I still see this as subordinate in our current society. Race, for me, comes up right now at a time when I'm just really aware of my white privilege. It's hard for me to look at the values, actions, or messages associated with this. One of the things that I noticed when I started doing this tool is that was really invisible to me. It was more like the absence of something else in my mind. It was just like, oh, that's just normal. And it took me a while to understand that when you're a fish, you don't know you're swimming in water. And so that's something that even now, kind of understanding what is white culture is hard for me to identify. Certainly in our society, I'm seeing right now with events that have unfolded that this is a dominant one, and that it has afforded me privileges that, again, maybe weren't always visible to me. But I can see now many things that are different because of my whiteness.
And what's interesting is, and those are very different than what I would say 4 weeks ago and what I would say now. 4 weeks ago, I would have said the first things that popped up for me were one, and I realize we have attendees that are different ages, but for me, I would have said mother, and then I would have said wife, then I would have said Christian, like religion, and then I would have said, being a female. Those things pop up for me first, which is interesting to me because I feel like everyone would probably say probably African American, female, physician, and mother or Christian. Those that know me, they probably would say those things, but that's not how I see myself first. And that's not what I put out in the world and I think about readily, at the drop of a dime, just when I'm doing nothing, when I'm daydreaming. That's not the things, the identity pieces that pop me. Now, and in the last 10 days, I would say I feel race so much more, but that's not how I walk out in the world. It's part of me. It just is. When you're a fish, you don't know you're swimming in water, but I don't think about it as much as other people think about it for me. So it's really interesting because that's what everyone sees first. And that's what I'm supposed to brandish is this African-American female, but that's just not what I think about. I think about my values as a mother, and that's been at the forefront of everything I'm doing in the last couple of weeks because of what's going on in the country. But it's interesting that you say those things because it's changed over the last month.
Mm-hmm.
It has. Domination and subordination. I feel like interesting when we talk about race because one thing struggle with is, and I'll say this that because I wanted to spark a little bit of conversation. African-American women, by and large, are viewed as aggressive and direct and abrasive and all these negative connotated words. I will say that we're taught that. So, and again, I'm not speaking for the entire race, but I'm saying as a group, we are taught that. And if you think about that, the history, we're taught to not cry in public. We're taught to not show that. And you think about it, and I've done many of these talks, both with my residents and others, and I thought back to where does that come from? And I even asked my grandmother, who was the daughter of a slave, and she is picked cotton, when she's still alive, and she raised me. And I thought, where does that come from? And she said, we passed that down to you guys because when you showed fear and you showed the tears, something bad happened to you. They took your child, they took your spouse, they took something from you. Something bad happened when you showed that emotion. And so that's been passed down. And I've even done it to my daughter where my son will cry and I don't say anything, but my daughter cries and I say, we don't do that in public. And so it's just ingrained in you. And I say that because African-American female is seen as such a dominating demographic. But I know for a fact that for many of us, that direct, what people say is abrasive behavior, right behind it, tears, waiting and trying not to come out. So that when we talk about, cultural humility, one thing that I teach a lot about in medicine is that if you treat a patient who is Caucasian or white who is crying because you did something to her, you told her news, you told her she has cancer, you told her something bad about her baby, and she cries, you immediately stop what you're doing and you hold her hand and you say, I'm so sorry I hurt you. Something that I said wasn't good. Please tell me what you're feeling. And you immediately, all your defenses are down and you're really in tune to what's going on because you hurt her. And so oftentimes in the African-American culture with women, if they're giving you that, what we call attitude in the mainstream media, she's got an attitude. Mm-hmm. A lot of times if you react in the exact same way that you would a white woman who's doing that and say, you know what, whatever I'm saying is hurting you, it's making you feel bad. My residents are always just completely flabbergasted because they get the exact same reaction. The African-American woman will stop, they'll pause because they're shocked that someone actually realized that was the pain, and then they cry many times. Then tears will come, and then they'll open up, and so that's where cultural humility is asking, something I'm doing is not quite right. Everybody's not one size fits all. Maybe this group of people more likely tends to do this, but maybe not. And maybe I should just check in and see why I'm getting this rather than rely on my own emotion or what I'm getting back, you know? What do you think, Chris?
Yes, I love that. And I love how you say, you know, be able to ask, which is part of the skill set that I think is so important. So this is the kind of taking stock of it. This next slide, which we've kind of done, and I think we've been kind of talking about what it looks like. You know, it's authentic communication, which I think is what you just kind of described, Traci. And for physicians, I don't know. I mean, physicians are kind of the top ahead of all all the helping professionals in many ways, in the way that it's seen. If we were, I guess we could have added that to the cultural identity too. And so that the power differential can be very real. So authentic communication may not be something you're trained in. And shared decision making is another piece that, you know, might be something that we have to work harder at when we're putting cultural humility into action in those kind of settings. The skill set that you described, you know, in I think you didn't even know a while back that this is like, we have a name for this in psychology, right? It's just good clinical work in your practice, but it's called motivational interviewing in our world. And we think of these OR skills of open questions and affirmation, reflective listening, and then being able to provide summary reflections as kind of like micro skills that we are working on when we do cultural humility. So I don't know if you have any examples of that, Traci, of how you do this in your work, and we could maybe share those.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is yesterday I was in the office and I saw 25 patients, and it just was so burdensome and heavy what was going on in the world. And I just have been finding it so incredibly difficult kind of plug through your day and kind of ignoring what's going on, not only just as an American, not only as a mother, but an African-American mother, a physician, someone living in Missouri. All these things have just been kind of running just crazy in my head. And so I was thinking, okay, analyze everything and put it away and just focus on what's going on with each of these patients. And so I found myself critiquing myself, and I said, you know what, Traci, I think you're wrong. You know, I really thought I'm going to go in today and I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to put my phone away so that I don't get all the news things and I don't hear anything. And the first patient of the day is African-American woman, and she is just, you can tell the tears are just right here. And I listened to her baby, and her baby's doing fine. And then I said, how you doing? And she just broke down crying. And I said, oh man, you know, it's pretty heavy. We spent 20 minutes talking about everything, and she out. And then I walked away going, yeah, ask everybody. I'm just going to ask everybody how they're doing. And I asked the same question all day. And I said, how are you doing with the state of the world right now? And so, you know, it was an open-ended question. They can take it however. Maybe it's coronavirus because someone is, you know, has a family member who's sick, or they're scared that they're going to get sick, or maybe it's the, you know, police brutality that's been on TV, whatever they are. And then I thought, Traci, no, you've been thinking a lot about, you thought about this wrong. That in my mind, I immediately thought I'm going to ask all the African-American patients, and I have a very large following. So I thought I'd see a lot of them today. And then I thought, wait a second, no, it's affecting all of us. You've been saying that out loud. You've been posting, you've been talking to your friends, you've been doing all this stuff in your village, and it's affecting everybody. So why would I not ask every single patient? Because every single patient's feeling this. And so then I asked the next patient, who happened to be white, and she just stopped and was like, what do you mean? And I said, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And she just was like, why? I mean, do you really want to talk about it? And I said, if you want to, I'm just asking if you want to. And she said, I don't know. I feel like everything I say is going to be wrong, and I feel like I don't know what to say, and I feel like I need to say to you. And I was like, this isn't just my world, it's your world too. It's not just affecting us, it's affecting everyone. And she started crying because she's like, yeah, I mean, it is affecting me. And I just think that yesterday I learned a lot just from going through that exercise, like you said, because as it relates to what's going on with George Floyd, that's not just a Black issue. It's an everybody issue. And as we talk about interviewing skills, you just need to constantly, check in, but use open-ended questions and let people go where they need to go, and, affirm that, it's okay to not know. It's okay to not have answers. It's okay to, but just try. I mean, with cultural humility, I didn't know what she was going to say. I didn't know. I don't know how a white person feels in this situation, but I can let her tell me.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you say, like, just try, and it's okay to make mistakes. I think that's what's built into this process of lifelong learning, is that we're going to all make mistakes, and so we're continually learning and being curious, rather to master a set of concepts, which is just different.
It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy, and nobody has all the answers. Like, there are no answers to be had, because it's going to change every day. Even with those patients, I asked all day, and every patient I got a different answer. And I saw a diverse population yesterday, and everyone had a different answer. Everybody did. And I couldn't predict. People that I thought would say one thing didn't. And I just started, challenging myself to go, oh, I wonder what she's going to say. I wonder what she's thinking. And, everyone was different, which is another example of cultural humility, in my opinion, because what I thought their demographics were and how they would feel were completely different.
Yeah. So the third part of kind of what we wanted to make sure we covered today is really how cultural humility looks like in research practice, in addition to in clinical work. And I was going to share one example from my work, which is a project called 2Gen Thrive. And if you are coming from a place of cultural humility, then it doesn't work very well to plop down your intervention about what you think needs to change in a community and the way you think it needs to change. And psychologists have been really slow to learn this. We develop all these things that we know work based on all kinds of data points, but we don't necessarily do a good job of partnering with families to really understand what they want first and foremost, and then how that will work. And so something that came out of the tradition of cultural humility is a type of research called community-based participatory research, or CBPR. I've been fortunate enough to participate in a CBPR-informed project that involved looking at the intergenerational cycle of adverse childhood experiences. And what that is, adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, really are just a range of different traumas that happen, and chronic stressors, such as experiencing the loss of a loved one at a young age, experiencing chronic poverty, being in a situation in which you experience community violence or interpersonal violence or abuse or neglect. So there's a list, and we know, and Traci, you can probably comment more so than me on the impact medically of your ACE score. So we know that this is a bad thing for people's overall health, not just their mental health, and it shortens life expectancy. So the question was, what do people in the communities that are most affected by ACEs want to see to address the problem? And so for that, we developed a group of stakeholders, and it included clinicians, physicians and nurses, social workers and psychologists from Children's Mercy, from Operation Breakthrough, which is the largest Head Start in the area, which is a daycare system that we have here in the U.S. for reduced pay and daycare services and preschool services. And then so families, parents who were attending Operation Breakthrough, this early childhood system. And the idea was to level the playing field. So remember in the video, it talked about mitigating power imbalances. So the idea was to really provide a place where we could all be equal stakeholders at the table and bringing all of our different expertise. And that's been the result. We've created kind of a multi-level study that involved interventions for parents and for children, and community advocacy work has been the next step. And so I've been really proud to be a part of that. I wanted to share, because the Community Action Board gave me permission to do this, how they have defined toxic stress. There's a medical definition, but I think this one is so much more compelling. And this was the starting point for all of our clinical and research work. Stress that is damaging to our physical, emotional, and mental health. Toxic stress seeps under the skin and into our bodies, causing pain, and is contagious and unhealthy for our kids and families. So that was really the starting point for us of thinking, if we're gonna work across generations, what we were doing was play therapy with kids, and what we realized is that's not really addressing this kind of pain. We need to really help support caregivers. And so a lot of the work we've been doing then is to find ways to support mothers, to address their own trauma, to address their mental health. And that's kind of taken me to partner with Traci as in our clinical work. So I don't know if you want to talk about that or other parts of your clinical research.
I was hoping you talk about it. I was getting so excited just hearing you. So we know that in the urban core of Kansas City, there's lots of disparities. Kansas City actually has Missouri has the #1 rate of sudden infant death syndrome, or babies that go to sleep and don't wake up less than a year old in the entire union. We're one. Missouri is. Right. And Kansas City is very high. If the rate is 0.2, we're like 1.4. Like, it's really bad, 6 to 7 times higher than we should be. And so the urban core, right around where Truman Medical Center and St. Luke's Hospital and research are, some of those zip codes have the highest rates of maternal mortality, preterm birth, sudden infant death syndrome, and other comorbidities that are associated with stress, social determinants of health, and other inequities. So, with my work in the Missouri Board on maternal mortality, every single death that happens in Missouri comes across my desk in a panel of 13 or 16 people from around the state, all together every 6 weeks, and we look at every single death that happens within a year of having a baby or pregnancy. And so we see a lot of the same risk factors over and over again. And what we've done is with these themes, a lot of them have to do with mental and substance abuse, toxic stress, and other social determinants of health, and inability to actually care, and address a lot of mental health disorders. And so I have this buddy, her name is Sexton, and she's kind of good at it. So I figure I might as well bring her in. She's our Children's Mercy. So we have a really great project that we're getting ready to embark upon, where we use our own community health workers that are living the fight every day, that know the community. And just as Chris just discussed in our previous project, bringing them into the fold, training them appropriately to be able to do CBT and other methods that give back to the community, not only by helping someone be gainfully employed, an opportunity to help the community, but then also changing these social determinants. And it always makes me choke up because I just can't wait.
I can't wait either. And we just have to partner with them from the start. And we know what we need to do, and we just need to get started. Well, we have gotten started, but yeah.
So Martha, I don't know if you have questions. We don't want to take up too much of our time because we will be here for another hour.
Yes.
This was wonderful. And as you were talking, so many thoughts were coming to my mind. And, we are almost actually at the end of our program, because this is our 50 minutes program. But if any of the friends would like to type your questions in the question and answer box, you're welcome to. I think we can take a couple of questions. And I find this adverse childhood experience, the ACE score, very very interesting. I just learned about it, I think 3-4 years ago. How do you relate it with the, this adverse childhood experience with the likelihood of people, being violent, and are there studies about that, violence and adverse childhood?
About being more likely themselves to be perpetrators of different acts of violence.
Yes.
Well, certainly much more likely to be imprisoned, and so I don't know that I could say for sure to what extent that reflects violence. And that research may be out there. I'm just not aware of it. Are you, Traci?
I only know about being imprisoned, and also preterm birth, and trauma is definitely there are a couple of comorbidities like hypertension and diabetes and things like that. But I don't know about the relationship with to be violent themselves.
And do you have on top of your head what are the experiences that are included in this ACE score?
Well, there are a couple of competing instruments. The original instrument developed by two physicians included a more narrowly defined list, and a group out of Philadelphia has expanded the ACE score to also encompass more community level stressors, which are kind of underrepresented. But some of the things that are on the list are having a parent die, a parent in prison, being the victim of child abuse, child neglect, having sustained periods of time without access to medical or food scarcity. And then on the broader tool, there's a lot more information about neighborhood, community level violence, and some of those other risk factors.
And for the parents and teachers that are joining us, what would you recommend? How can we teach our children? How can we teach our youth cultural humility?
I feel very strongly that it's not something that you teach, it's something that you show. So what I mean by that is, I speak often. Chris and I have become so close in the last, I don't even know, 5 years or 6 years, because one of the first things she ever asked me was about, we have this thing we call ourselves brown mom, peach mom, because we parent differently but the same. And so one thing I know is that we are a victim of our stereotypes of the media, and what we see is very, very good at being efficient. In fact, if your brain isn't able to be efficient, you're actually probably have some things that you have to attend to. It's very difficult to be gainfully employed and productive in a society like ours if you're not efficient. Suffice it to say, if I am very tired and I go home and I can get home, even though I'm not really attention, I can turn right where I'm supposed to turn right. I can stop the stoplight, but I'm not consciously trying to get myself home. I just do. So I bring the example that if I see the same type of person over and over and over again, your brain will automatically start to pull together demographics that were attributed to that person. If I see a young Latino male, and again, these are stereotypes. If I see a Latino male that's always in my neighborhood mowing a lawn, then I make it's very difficult for me to see that person may also be president. If I see a young Southeast Asian with a hijab, I might not see her as the best basketball player because I've never seen that before. My brain has a hard time trying to reach for those images because it's very efficient and it wants to get on a certain path as quickly as possible to save energy. So when you ask how can you teach your children, you have to constantly be passionate about showing your children other images that constantly challenge the construct that your brain is trying to do. Again, those are very, words, but it's literally you walking down the street and you see someone who's corpulent and you say, "Oh, Gabriel, isn't she beautiful?" And we've done this with our children. And originally, when he was 4, would go, "Oh, mommy, her, isn't she beautiful?" "Oh yeah, she is." "Oh, she's gorgeous." And then you'll go, oh, that's what mommy says is gorgeous. The Asian woman who people say, frequently are thin, taller, milder mannered. Oh, I just love how she speaks so eloquently. I love how beautiful she is, her confidence. Oh, Adrian would go, oh, her mom? Yes. I mean, look how she is beautiful. The woman who, or the man who's a little bit shorter, you say, oh, I just, love his confidence and how he's commanding attention. Those things that just make your brain go, that's not what I thought you would say. You have to constantly do that. And as you do that, you challenge your brain to not put people in a box. And it has to be conscious, because otherwise the big black man is scary, because you will always on TV. Every 6 o'clock news has that. So you have to show yourself, oh my goodness, isn't Mr. Johnson the kindest, gentlest man? Isn't he the sweetest teddy bear? He is. Anyone who knows my husband knows that. But see this guy on the 6 o'clock news every night and he looks like he went and terrorized someone, then you're going to say that. Challenge your children. Open up a magazine, flip through everything that you think is not a stereotype. Say it out loud. Tell them, man, isn't she brilliant? Isn't he just, whatever the stereotype is, go against it. Challenge it. Feed their brain with dissonance. That's awesome.
That's wonderful. It's something we can all do and we can all practice every day. In social sciences, we refer to it as a counter narrative, to deconstruct the dominant narratives.
Yes.
Counter narrative. You say it so much more eloquently.
You said it exactly right. You said it in examples that we can all do. That's what we love it.
This is wonderful. As you were talking about cultural humility, I was thinking about my father who passed away 10 years ago, but really was an example of cultural humility. I didn't have the term to define it, but when he passed away, he was an immigrant. He had the strong accent. He had moved from Iran to Brazil when he was 25. He didn't speak the language, didn't have much money. He became your colleague, Traci. He was an OBGYN. He went to college in Brazil, and he belonged to a religious minority. He was a Baha'i and lived in a town where 99% of the population were Catholics, so there was 150,000 inhabitants and they had 8 churches. And when he passed away, his patients held several masses for him, one in all the churches, and opened then one small clinic in his name. But everybody we talked to, they all said to us the same thing over and over, to say, Dr. Masood treated me as if I was the most important person in this world. Treated me as so it was always with a lot of, always bended, I think, to the moral authority, to the dignity, nobility in the other human being, recognize this. And they were so the level of unity and integration that he was able to build because of that cultural humility was,
That's beautiful, Mark.
That is beautiful. That's a great way to think about it. And that's why it really is love at its foundation. That's all that it boils down to as human beings. So, and
see the person, just see the person.
Yes.
We're not all the same, and that's okay. I know in the last week we've talked a lot of friends from Pembroke, friends from other schools that have said, well, I don't want to teach my children to see differences. I don't want to think that people are different. And I think we went wrong when that was pushed in the 90s, I'm colorblind and I see nothing, and I think that's wrong. I think differences is beautiful. And again, also that white is not the antithesis of culture, that all of us, peach and brown and everything between, Jewish and Muslim and Baha'i and everything is beautiful. And so, one thing I struggle with sometimes is we have these cultural fairs, and I feel like people think that it's almost bland to be white, and that's not true. Everything is beautiful and everything is important, and so I just think we have to see people and see people in love, everyone. And that's the humility of it all.
Yes, exactly. If you have time, one more question that one of the participants share. For the people that were not raised seeing cultural humility, is there something effective, any effective methods of trying to instill it at a later age?
Beautiful question. I think that in the question, the person has their answer, which is that they are clearly someone who is dedicated to that kind of critical self-reflection and lifelong learning that is the hallmark of cultural humility. So the beauty of cultural humility is that it isn't a set of concepts you need to master. It is simply committing to approach each person with openness and curiosity, and preparing to be wrong, and taking that risk, and being able to be educated when someone lets you know that something you said has hurt them. If we're going to have some of those conversations, Traci and I have talked about this, and with one another, that mistakes are going to be inevitable, and microaggressions actually are going to be inevitable. So expect that, and if you're going to have those conversations, and be able to have the humility to accept those mistakes in yourself.
Can I give them an example? I want to give you an example of something that Chris and I learned about each other early on, and I'm just going to use our race because that was what we were talking about. Early on, when we started doing the work of really realizing that we were going to be in each other's lives forever, we were talking about race and our raising our children. And this is for Brown Moms, People's Mom. And so then what happened is we were talking about just our children, and how Chris was saying that, well, I tell our children all the time to make sure that if they see an injustice, and they see something going on with a brown person or any other person of another demographic, that they better do this and they better do that, and all this stuff. And another African-American mom and I, we said, you do? And they said, yeah, we talk to our kids all the time about it. And I said, oh, we don't. And they and Chris is like, well, why aren't you talking to your kids about the injustices and everything? And I said, really, talking to your kids all the time? And everybody that was in there was like, yeah, we do it all the time. And there were two other African moms, and both of us, Martha, go, no, we never talk about it. We're like, why? And it was just a heated debate. It was so fruitful. And we go, because we don't want them to wear that cloak. We don't. That coat is heavy and it stinks. And that's in the closet. One day they're gonna have to put that coat on. But we don't want them to put that coat on right now. We want them to be in their little bubble where they don't realize that the world is hateful and that people are gonna treat them differently. And so we don't talk to them about that. Well, your kids aren't going to talk to my kids about that, are they? Because kids don't realize people aren't going to them. And Chris was just like,
it blew my mind, because the racial socialization, it was so different. And so it's been through it, we've had to kind of have these ongoing conversations to kind of now it makes perfect sense. The way you said it just now with the cloak, I don't know. I mean, that's just, it isn't heavy for my kids in the same way, right? And that's why we could have this.
It sticks and it doesn't fit, and it's ugly, and it's not swaggy, and it's in the closet. I don't want them to put that on until they have to, and they're gonna put it on one day, but it doesn't fit right because they're kids. So I'm not gonna put that coat on them until I have to, and it's gonna be a very last minute. I've told them there's a nasty coat in there. They're aware. They're not oblivious. I've told them that, they know the history, but they don't wear it. They walk out and they have their head high and who they are because we don't put that coat on them. So I just think that's interesting because you're doing work on one side, but it's different for me. And that was something, Martha, that we learned early on. We're like, oh, wow, okay. I didn't know that you were doing. Well, no, don't tell my kids. Oh, no.
And it's informed how I have conversations with my kids. So I think that's the work, is that we've been able to continue to have that dialogue, and through that, it's kind of informed how we've socialized our our own kids. And I think that's what this is all about then, is us being a real village and a community. So those conversations bring us so much closer.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've learned so much from each other, and we've not gotten it right. We've just grown.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Right? We've just grown so much. We're going to take this act on the road, Mark.
Yeah. It's never done. That's the thing about cultural humility. The work is never done.
And you're creating a ripple of change, really. You are an example for all of us, for those of us who know you, the lucky ones that know you. And you know what, I'm really humbled to have been with you tonight. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your experience. I received, some friends are typing the chat box. They thank you all so much for this opportunity to listen and learn. This has been a beautiful way to spend an hour. I have especially loved all your examples and metaphors, Traci and Chris. Thank you very much. I want to remind everyone that these presentations have been recorded. They are available on our website, sjcinitiative.org. And if you have a chance, please keep visiting our website. We're planning and coming up with new programs for children, youth, and adults. Thank you all very much for participating. Thank you, Traci and Chris. And hope to see you in person soon and give you a real hug.
Yes, look forward to it. Love to you both, and thank you all.
Love to you both.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.